Today, we're going to talk and try our best to stay away from strength training and all the physical assessment side of stuff and really talk about climbing. And that is Coach Gabe's expertise and his wisdom. This episode is essentially the birth child of what we've always done after every single clinic. And we just kind of sat on the porch afterwards, cracked the beer, and said, let's just talk about things and see where things go and be really introspective on what we taught, the students' reactions and feedback. And that's how this conversation probably gonna go today. It's gonna be nice and flowy and really talk about what to do outside, especially now that the weather for the majority of the world is getting really nice, and what we can do to utilize our time frame, whether it's 2 weeks or about 2 months of send temperatures wisely. And so that's why I'm here with Coach Gabe Olson, and he's going to direct me in that direction. What's going on, Gabe?
Yeah, I think today I just want to talk about things to consider when we're projecting and my approaches towards things, some things I've helped clients, and so forth, like keeping it pretty open. But I think let's just start with, like, for you, what are your best and worst habits when it comes to projecting for yourself?
Hmm. I think my best habit when it comes to projecting is maybe to a fault, kind of believing it can go. Like I can get on a climb all the time, all day, every day. I know not to cut myself off when I'm getting tired and whatnot because I know the quality of improvements going down. But I don't really get turned off too easily. I don't know if that came from like my baseball background and striking out a billion times, and you got to show up again the next day. But I can stick with a project for a long time and make little micro adjustments, realize that the progress is there, note that, come back. I think that's my best quality when it comes to projecting. I can
No,
stick
that's
with it.
huge. Like, optimistic, like just being optimistic is like one of the best traits, and then that's a great one. What about worst?
I think because I am still a baby in the climbing world, only about maybe like 5 or 6 years, and even less when it comes to caring about footwork. um, Being able to identify useful beta, and I think I get kind of married to a move. And
Okay.
I kind of think about when you came out to Pennsylvania and helped me on my project when it was snowing. And just a
When
little bit of
raining.
nuance, and yeah, raining. Oh god, it was so cold. But I still got my high point. And the little nuance into how you moved your body to make the move I was doing, which felt like a 9 out of 10 because I was just kind of like going straight for it, dead pointing into something a little bit more smooth and more realistic, and added to the optimism that, oh, wow, this thing could really go if I started doing this. And so I think that tunnel vision in this is the way, and not being able to better identify extra beta or other options is my problem.
That's kind of funny because so my best habit is what I said is finding the beta that best fits me,
Hmm.
and that, like, whether nobody else does it, that's fine. I love to look at hard climbs and be like, oh, like, well, why don't we just do this way? Or like, everyone's using this, but what if you just resequence that, or grab this foot chip or something instead? And so finding beta that fits myself, but also because I've been a coach for years, I'm good at looking at somebody else that I'm working with and being like, oh, well, like this beta would be good for you. And so I think, like, finding betas that fit the athlete, whether it's myself or others, is one of my biggest strengths when it comes to like hard climbing straight or projecting. I would say my worst, though, probably comes from my years of just rope climbing, and then end approach to like early years of climbing. But my worst would be accepting that projects are hard and trying hard is hard, like that it's not going to go down quickly. And so maybe on top of that would be that it's hard for me to fall a lot in front of others when I know that somebody else who I may be falling in is going to flash my project,
Yeah.
which, that's partially ego thing, but it also goes to show, like, I need to be on that route and they didn't, and so that's good, like, and I can, most of the time I'm good about still learning from them where I'm like, whoa, they're able to flash something I'm projecting. Like what mechanics or like what happened there that I like am not seeing. So sometimes I can use it productively, but I would say that the trying hard is like at a limit, and accepting that I'm going to be on this long term is a problem of mine.
Right. We actually
I'm just
talked.
not used to it.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that this weekend at Cornell when we did the clinic. Two of the ladies mentioned that trying hard was some type of skill that they needed to work on. I was like, absolutely. Like trying hard is a skill. It is not
Huge.
something that you are just going to wake up and be able to do. Like knowing how to go 0 to 100 when it's like a low start boulder problem, or if it's a crux move after you're pumped, to break through that little mental thing is totally crazy. Especially, and I always think back to when you hopped on Alzheimer's and you're on like attempt 25, super tired, whatever. And I was like, I don't know, maybe you can just kind of go for it. And you're like, yeah, screw it, I'm tired, why not? And then you almost pulled the boulder
Yeah.
just by getting after a little bit more than you would normally do. And so those of us that come from a very analytical and technical background, one of your biggest buckets to fill is probably trying hard and climbing. Like footwork doesn't matter. But then the other side is true, where if you're a big muscly, I don't know how to use my feet kind of person, footwork might not be bad for you.
Yeah, I think this podcast is going to work out well because I think I have 5 things to consider while projecting. And I think somewhere in our intro here, we've hit all 5 topics that I want to like bring
Nice.
forward. And so I think we can kind of start off and see, try to tie it together for people. First one I would say that everyone should consider is the time frame. And I think it's something that is often overlooked probably when people are projecting and like really like asking themselves, like what kind of project is this to you? And so like, is this a project that's in your gym right now? Is it a project that's at your local crag? Are you on a climbing trip? Or are you breaking into a new grade for your first time? Because I think each one of those has its own time frame that you have to be kind of comfortable with or understand kind of both the expectations, the parameter that's involved in that. If it's in a gym, like how old is that problem? Like it's probably going to be reset. Most commercial gyms, like it's on a fine, it's on a time frame. So it's like, maybe did you accept that project because it's the new set and you got psyched that one day, but like, are you going to be excited about it next week when the new set's up? So is your project truly a project for you? Sometimes I think limit bouldering and projecting gets kind of confused because I think one is like a limit bouldering in my sense, or in my opinion, I guess sometimes can be more about the performance of hard moves and still trying to really send it. I think projecting is trying to really learn and accept that you're going to be on something and it's hard enough for you that you can't just perform on it. You have to actually understand it to be able to perform. So something like that, I think time frame is interesting. I think local crags are amazing for you to try your hardest. I think there's the really cool part about being able to go on a trip and look at the hard classics that you've seen in all the magazines you've heard about. But I think your time frame to likely get that done as a project, unless you're going to be traveling back to that area often, maybe not as likely. It could be a good goal for your trip, but then you might need to decide like, well, how much time am I taking out of my trip this one thing? And are you cool with that? Like you might be psyched that like, yeah, I'm going on a 7-day trip and I'm putting all 7 days on this one. If you're into that, then great. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just something to consider. And then I think, breaking into a new grade, that's kind of an interesting time frame as well, because it might take you a lot longer than you think. Like how much time have you put into building that pyramid or something like that? Like, are you ready to break into that new grade? Are you right on the cusp of it? Or is it kind of a goal that's a little out there still? And so are you currently climbing V7 saying that I want to break into V10? Well, there's grades in between. or if it is just that from 8 to 9 or whatever the case is, that's still it's still a big jump. And so what's involved? That would be, I guess, my number one thing to consider: time frame. Any thoughts on that?
No, it makes total. I always think about going to West Virginia, which is our local short duration ish trip. It's like 6 hours from where I'm at in Pennsylvania. And I have a lot of climbs that I'm just like the classics. And I'm like, oh, that's my project, my project. But looking back at what you just said now, that could be a little bit unrealistic for me to have a positive association and a positive experience in this projecting process with those climbs. Because last year we got there maybe 5 or 6 times. This year, 0 climbing trips. It's painful. But it wouldn't be a reflection necessarily on my improvement as a climber in general. It's just I haven't had enough time to get there because it's 6 hours away and time and life and all that kind of stuff. However, I do have a local crag project, and that's where I can have a lot of time. It's 15 minutes away. It's definitely out of my realm, so to speak, kind of thing, with that jumping a new grade. But I can see the most progress on it because I have the amount of time. So my efforts and expectations can be met a little bit better there. And I have to just be a little bit more realistic and reflect better on the West Virginia type projects or anything like that. So that's I like that. Kind of helps me.
Yeah, actually, I just started thinking a little more with that, and I guess it could tie into a couple different things I'll mention. But I do think that you can go to a trip, or go somewhere, try something, and whether if you didn't send it, but you're like, it's going to be a while from here, like it can still be a project that you can take the idea or the difficulty of that boulder, and you can still learn from your project back home, whether it's on a simulator or you're setting something, you're doing something similar where you're learning like why that was difficult for you and maybe why you didn't send it that trip. Or I think there's other professionals who they're learning the movements before they ever see the project. And I think there's the Burden of Dreams, like Nolly's hard boulder. But there's like quite a few professionals right now who like they have simulators at home for it. And some of them have been practicing the move before actually like seeing the boulder their first time. They've just like watched videos, kind of understood that like the size of the hold and things like that. And they're like creating the experience before actually getting to the boulder, so they can make that project time and that goal, come to reality a little faster. And so I think their time frame has started before they even got to the boulder, which is kind of a cool thing, is that like your project can, like that's a part of your time frame, is that you can practice and learn. But I think the performance versus the learning is still kind of the difference between those two. Is they're not going there to just limit boulder, they're kind of going there to discover it,
Absolutely,
and gain some new skills and knowledge.
Yeah, the modern age. I forget the video I saw, but I think I know what you're talking about. Like the modern age of bouldering, where you can just 3D scan the boulder and have it shipped to you before you even go to wherever it is.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I think there's like Aiden Roberts has like the 3D molded of that one, and then I think there's like Vadim or something, like a Russian, I forgot his name, who like he just set his on like the moon board.
Right.
Which is like funny because it's like different holds, but he's like, yeah, it's the same kind of idea. I just grabbed what I had and I think they're both cool ways, because it's like you don't always need an actual replica.
Right.
It's you're trying to understand kind of the move and the distance and the speed that it takes. You'll figure out the rest of the fine tuning later. Number 2, who's all involved in your projecting? And I think you kind of brought that up with us on Alzheimer's, but I think like it's good for you to recognize, like, is this a solo mission? Do you need, like, if you're rope climbing, do you need a belayer? Who's your belayer, like, that you actually trust? Same with a spotter. Or do you just need like your support crew or like hype man crew? Like, are they involved in your process? Is there a climber who's climbed that boulder or climbed above that grade in your group helping you, in that process? So I think projecting doesn't have to be alone, and I think that's both obvious and not obvious to people, is that they think like, this is my project, but it's like, well, there can be a lot of other people aiding you in your project. So yeah, I mean, I think it was funny with like Alzheimer's. It's like I had tried a million times, but I kind of tried almost lackadaisical, where I'm like putting in a lot of attempts, but it was because I was like, well, if I'm doing everything right, like I shouldn't have to try hard. But
Yep.
then it was like when I'm done, and then you're just like, well, what if you just like grab harder and just like kind of like throw your like technique to the wind and like grip it on like, oh yeah, whatever. And like once I dropped my guard and didn't care, then suddenly I performed really well, because again, like I had somebody else kind of remove me out of my head, give me a different prompt. And that prompt was enough to be like, oh, high point. And then I could even go back to my technical way and high point back on that. And it was just kind of, it didn't matter what I did, it was better than my other attempts. Both frustrating and awesome, experience, because you're just like, oh, dumb.
Exactly.
Um,
If you're listening to this, that means everyone needs a Colin McGee in their background.
yeah, exactly. Hype man.
That's right.
And I guess, yeah. Does it matter? Like another thing, I guess, when I'm talking about the crew is like, does it matter to you who is in that crew? Because like there are plenty of people I know who like will walk the crag and be like, hey, I just need a belay on this, 12R trad climb. And you're like, what? No, like don't find just a random person to do that. Like, even if it's a safe sport climb, like, do you know that person? Like, can they do it? Like some people are really comfortable just having anyone spot them and anyone and everyone. I am a person who's like, I trust like 3 people to blame me at my limit, where I'm like, nope. Like, if you don't know my style, I don't want you to be attached to my rope.
And I'm a heavy catch, so you are gonna fly. Like weight matters.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I blade you, and I'm really competent player, like to do it. But it was one of those things. Like the first fall, I was like, okay, like this is different. Like I gotta get used to it, and like. Like you're somebody that if a Blair is still feeding you a bunch of slack because they just think that is the right thing to do, it's like, no, you are the slack. I am light. Like I am the slack. I'm going to go up already.
100%. And knowing you were on belay, I was very confident. I was like, I'm just going to kind of run this out a little bit more, because I know down there is very safe, but in doing so that's that dynamic that we're kind of talking about, is
totally
how confidence changes, how attention to detail changes with who you're with.
And then I guess from the bouldering side, like spotter, yes, it's like awesome to have a good spotter, or people who are like managing the pads and taking those elements out from you, like where they're like actually moving pads, keeping it nice and clean and safe landings. That's awesome. I also think though, like I said back on the first one, or like one of my weaknesses was like climbing with people who are stronger or something like that. Like, am I going to still perform? Is that going to be good? Or like, is that going to work well for me or not? And I think it's, do I know that person? Do I not know that person? Am I okay in falling in front of that person? Am I not? That's like kind of anything. But I think if it's like a busy crag and you're all getting on, the same boulders or the same rope climbs, it is interesting. I think I've had a couple of experiences where you'll have somebody who's on the wall, like ask the crowd, either like, nobody talk, I'm on the wall. You're kind of like, whoa, this is an interesting demand, and you're like, what is allowed, like, like if you come in with your own little crew and you're like, hey guys, like when I'm on the wall, like I just want it like quiet, like I don't need somebody screaming at me and telling me to like, go get it, come on. Like, no, I want this. Like that kind of works for that little crew that you went in with that plan. But hey, there's 15 other people here now. Like, can you demand the crowd to no longer talk? Interesting. So I think that like has to be a consideration of like people you're around when you're choosing to go project, and like, are you choosing times where you can set the conditions? That's something to consider.
No, for sure. Because I would say, hey, if my project's in like a busy time, I always think to West Virginia, when it's nice out and there's a big river behind you, you probably don't want a project down in Somersville because there's 100 people floating and boating and it's loud. So if you're someone that doesn't like getting amplified with noise, probably not a good time to go down there. And so you gotta have to switch around. Maybe that affects your season's hike. Granted, summertime's not maybe the best ascend temperatures for most climbers, but that kind of speaks to the whole your environment is going to shape depending upon where you go, what time of the year it is, who you're with, that kind of thing. Good.
Okay.
Number 3.
When should you start to go for the send on projecting? And I think there's a lot of people who, like, the second they get to the boulder, like, I'm going to project this. And then, okay, like, if this is your project, you probably already have the idea in your head that you're not going to flash it. So if you're not going to flash it, do you have to start from the ground the first time? Like, where's your crux? Like, go feel the holes. How's the top? Is that even a consideration for you? Like, if you're not going to flash it, why sit at the beginning of the climb every time? And so, like, are you ready to send it, or have you started to apply different tactics that you aren't applying? Or I guess I should say, does your projecting tactics differ from your flashing and on-sighting tactics?
Right.
And I think those are very different.
This brings me to a quick aside that I brought up your drill or teaching mode with your students where you don't start, you don't finish a climb, and you just learn how to learn. I brought that up at this weekend, and I saw the widest eyes ever. Like, what do you mean I'm gonna go into a gym and not get to the top? You're crazy, dude. I'm like, just a thought.
I mean, and that's the thing, the pushback is there because I think, again, people aren't recognizing what they're trying to do, and I think I probably talked about that a little further down, actually, on the list, so we might loop back to that. But no, I think that's exactly it, is like, how are your tactics changing? Are you doing individual moves? Are you doing links? Have you tried out a bunch of different betas? Like, you get married to a beta, well, that makes sense kind of when you're just trying to send it. But if you're just trying to learn it and feel positions and say, okay, efficiency, like, cool, this beta is way easier for this move, but then once I get to that move, getting out of this beta is way harder. I just had that a couple days ago where I have this one project that it's a really, really glassy pinches up to a crimp and then bump to another terrible glassy pinch. And it's a really high foot, and I have a hard time with it. And if I'm towing into it and going up, the move is extremely hard. But if I heel hook the foot chip, I can pull extremely controlled to the pinch and just hit it every time. But I cannot get out of the heel hook to then do the next move. So it's like, I learned this beta that I was like, oh my God, this changes everything. And I got super efficient at getting to this whole completely static and no energy. But then it's impossible for me to get out of the position. I ended up spending an entire session just trying to get a heel hook back out into a toe without cutting. And so it's like, okay, well, I spent a lot of time here, but I didn't think about the next move. And if I just set myself in the next move, I knew immediately a heel wasn't going to be there because I would have to jump off of it. So it's like, sometimes just going to the move above and working the move backwards or positioning it allowed me. But if I'm only starting from the bottom, I would just never see it.
That makes a ton of sense. It's kind of coming to a fork in the road. And you're like, oh, this is great. This is going to take me faster. And nope, it's an outlet. You got to turn around.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you would have just brought up your Google Maps and zoomed out a little bit, you would have saw. But you didn't.
That's called wasted time. Perhaps a good learning experience. Kind of reiterates maybe learning the hard way about this assessing climbs top down versus bottom up scenario. But yeah, that can happen.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting. It's very interesting.
I think that's pretty much all I have to say about 3. I think 3 is a big concept, but not that much to say. It's
right, and it makes me think about my project where it is a 40-foot 10C that I can almost do blindfolded now, and I even turned some of maybe the beta talk and go into another one of your topics, but I end up skipping the last clip before they first climb or first pitches anchors to create efficiency and not having to clip off my right hand because the crux move at the way up is a right hand move. But then there's like a little gray area getting from the anchors of the first pitch to the initiation of the crux up top that reflecting now on this conversation, I might need a little bit more time on because I don't think I give it as much attention because it's kind of like this sandwich section. Like I have this thing I'm trying to flow through blindly, and then I'm already thinking about the crux move up top, but I still have about 15 feet to climb. You can mess that up. And looking back on it, I think I need to now maybe at this point say, okay, first pitch, cool. I'm just going to climb that rest completely and turn the second pitch into another climb. Now I want to turn that into this nice flowy thingy and to get more skill and time on that because I've only ever done the top in send attempts compared to the bottom. I'm learning.
Totally. So that would be, I think, what's considered kind of a low pointing tactic is that you actually like work their climb backwards. So I'm on my last bolt to the chains. Oh, I can do that. I can go this bolt to the chains, this bolt, and you're working it down. So that way, like you've got all those moves dialed. You've been fresh for all the hard stuff. And then you've just been adding in a little section. And so then you're starting to see like, oh, well, man, it was really easy for me to go from anchor to, sixth bolt. But now when I add in those extra, that next bolt, like fifth, sixth to the top, like that suddenly was just enough to get me tired. So there's like probably something in that you're like, oh, these couple extra little moves added something, or there's a positioning, or like there really isn't any resting anymore. And so like sometimes I think, again, just whether it's like casual, it doesn't need to be a send really, but just timing your time frame between bolts. And like, if you go up for a send, like how long do you think it actually going to take you to climb this climb? And then you can kind of see like, oh yeah, like on my high point attempt, I got to this anchor in a minute and a half. Okay. And so then it's like, and then from here fully rested to here, I got in this time frame. Like you can kind of look at videos and attempts and being like, well, how fast did I move through that? And use it to kind of help whether you need to rest longer or, add bolts, change the tactic.
Right. Yeah, that's something what I'm going to be going into, I think, because that's going to be a little bit more useful after I get my beta burns on it and just kind of say, hey, where do I need to allocate my time the most? And that low pointing tactic sounds a lot like what I need to do.
Yeah, I have used it a couple times. I mean, definitely, I think don't fall into the trap of like if it is extremely easy terrain, like there probably isn't a reason for you to just hammer that side too much, because it is just more volume, and so sometimes I'm like, yeah, well, you do have that dialed. And so it's like the second where you're like, oh, this is hard, I should kind of learn those sections, and you can kind of low point in those. And I like to, by entering the crux and exiting the crux by at least a bolt or two, I think is the important part. Right. For me anyways. That's what kind of has really dialed me in. The rest of it doesn't mean I'm not going to pay attention to. I'm going to, like give the moves credit. Even 10D moves are hard at, like they add things to them.
Right.
That's the reason they're 10D and not, 5.9 or, or whatever the case is. Like it is harder and by great, multiple steps. So for 4, are you climbing your project by kind of via submission or by climbing it with intention? And so like, are you just going to attempt it enough to kind of hope that things clicked and you stuck the moves and you just sent it? Or are you learning from each past attempt and you're actually paying attention to like, from your mistakes in the previous attempts, what happened? Like, why did that idea not work? Why did that attempt not work? And now on your next attempt, you're actually going to place intention on what you're doing. Or are you just, oh, I fell, I'm going to get back on, I'm going to rapid fire it until I see success. And then if I happen to send it, like, I'm just like, woohoo, I did my project and I move on. But if you probably got right back on that climb or you revisit it again, you'd probably fall multiple times again. Like, I think that's kind of the difference, is climbing with kind of via submission, I think is closer to kind of the performance side of it, where it's like, which is kind of weird in a way, but like, I'm going to just throw at the climb enough until I land it versus learning why I'm not landing it the majority of the time.
Right.
And so I think yeah, like if you're really paying attention to each attempt and not essentially giving yourself the excuses, like I think of, how many times have you heard it or said it to yourself or anything like that? Like people are trying something really hard and immediately that's when I suck. I'm not strong enough. It's a weird move. All that stuff flows out. The thing that I think is a habit is that all of that, those sentences that you said are probably somewhat true. but like you're not finishing the thought. And I think what I mean by that is like, I suck at heel hooks. Okay, that gave me a point of direction to focus on. My
Right.
next attempt, I can focus on like why my heel, I'm not like that person's holding their tension and levering up, mine slipping out. Like there, you suck at heel hooks. Now focus on them and learn about them, ask about them, bring it back to your gym, like something like that. Like I'm not strong enough. Like I'm not strong enough to maybe hold this position. Is my hip up right? Like I'm not strong enough to be in or move in or out of this position. Okay, well, or am I correct? Am I in the correct position? So I think holds can feel way harder if you're in the wrong position. And so I think that's
Mhm.
something that people are like, oh, I'm not strong enough. I'm like, well, yeah, like I'm not strong enough to be in the wrong beta. Like that's like that's really hard. Like I can make something harder. How do you know you're right?
100%. I've made
And
5'9", 5'13" all my life so far.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You can climb easy stuff a really hard way. And I think so that's part of it. And then like it's one of my pet peeves with like, teen kids for sure. I hear this a lot, but I hear this from everyone, and I've said it probably plenty too, is like it's weird. Who cares? Who told you it
Yeah.
was meant to be comfortable?
Right.
Like when is rock climbing meant to be comfortable? Like I think it's weird is just that's okay. Like learn to manage being uncomfortable. Like that is
Mhm.
a skill alone.
Mhm.
Like that's a
Yeah.
big part of projecting is how do you comfortize that position enough for you not to think about the weirdness and the uncomfortable side, but like, oh, here's the position to now get out of it. Like if it's uncomfortable, learn to get out of it.
Right.
But you just saying it's weird just essentially says, well, I should quit. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I don't want to do anything that makes me feel uncomfortable. Okay, I mean, if you want to accept that answer, then that's fine. I mean, gym climbing and commercial gym climbing will probably be something more appealing to you because it tends to be more comfortable. Competition climbing probably be very against you because you'll probably hate it because it's very uncomfortable. It's not meant to be fun. It's meant
Right.
to challenge you. Same with like kind of weird climbs. Like there's a good weird and bad weird, at times, but realistically, that's weird is okay. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people forget that.
Absolutely. Definitely like a mindset too. Coming into something and
Huge.
seeing things as a challenge rather than just writing it off. Like I said, that's weird. Like, oh, I quit. I don't want to do this. I always see that from a movement side of things, where movement variability is what makes good rock climbers. The more your body can access, the more tools in your tool bag makes you a better climber for something else, maybe in your style. So if it's weird now, it's going to be helpful later, even if it doesn't seem like it.
Absolutely. And you know, that position may be weird, but you can also probably create that same position in more comfortable holds, maybe. So like, and just get used to being in that small box. Like a really high foot, or something like that is kind of a weird, uncomfortable position. So it's like you can try to like mimic those and set those, weird positions up on holds and stuff that you enjoy more, and just kind of expose yourself slowly to it. You don't have to just do it on that move. But yeah, I mean, like kind of on this whole topic, like I think like all in all, like climbing with intention and like really feeling the detail, like every detail of the rock and what's going on in your body to make the moves, and like, yeah, essentially just feeling everything, executing on that feeling, and then reflecting upon the, what happened, whether I sent it or I fell. That is projecting. And
Mhm.
so if you like being that present in the moment is extremely tiring,
Yep.
and being
100%.
and being that like aware all the time. So I think, you know, you have to kind of give yourself a little bit of grace in the sense that like the tiring and hard of the project might not be physical, but it's just the mental capacity that it's taking to perform. Like the act of learning is often much harder than the action learned, you know?
Mhm.
And
Right.
so
Oh
I
yeah. Oh
think,
my god. Yeah.
you know, that's the thing is like, yeah, like that, I think that's a huge part of projecting is that you have to be willing to pay attention and learn and get mentally tired, you know,
Yes.
in a way.
Brings me back to this weekend talking about some program examples and samples. And we went over like in a sample strength phase where we might be getting heavy on our fingers 2 to 3 days a week and introduce like a fun day that you can climb, but like have it focused on a skill or something like that. And one of the questions that came up was like, well, when do we get to climb? I was like, you are climbing, are you not? But I kind of forgot the little context can be like this is a training focused session. And from the outside, not everyone's goal is to be so optimizing on training or so optimizing on projecting. So you do have to self-reflect on how much do you want this in a sense and how much are you willing to invest, but make sure that your expectations go up or down with that. So don't expect a ton out of anything if you're not projecting hard or if you're not training hard. But it's not to say that you have to do those things. And so I thought it was funny just because like, oh, you're climbing 4 days a week. What do you mean oh, you're right. Like some of these people don't want to just like, I have a plan every single time.
And I think that's 100% valid. Like, I think
Mhm.
climbing by submission isn't a bad thing if your
Mhm.
intention isn't to get something faster in that time frame or the
Right.
focus. Like, that's just I'm climbing it by submission because I'm having fun rock climbing. Like, that's
Mhm.
great. And so I think again, it's not bad. It's just maybe not, you know, matching other things that we're looking for, which is in our time frame. How fast do we want this to go down? You
Right.
know, do we actually care if we break into the next grade or not? Like,
Right.
are we on a multi, you know, we could be 5 seasons from now, or it could be next week. Like, we don't care.
Right.
And so I'm like, that's awesome. Like, if climbers don't need to always be trying to perform and treat this like they're trying to be a professional, like this is just a hobby, then cool, have fun. Like, you don't need to be training all the time.
Right.
So I think, yeah, that's a really important thing is
Absolutely.
you can like training and not have to do it all the time.
Exactly. It's just kind of knowing what it could do for you if you want it.
Yeah. Or, you know, realistically, like if you are running into those injuries or you are running into, you know, things like that, like strength training helps you climb more, you know? And so I think that's the thing is like, you don't need to apply all these training drills on the wall all the time. You could go lift to help make you more robust and then just go climb. But I think, yeah, I'll let the climber choose. You know? Yeah. Like,
It is your journey.
and, like,
It's your journey, not ours.
exactly. Yeah, we're
we're
just
here
here
to
to aid and help.
on.
We're not here to tell you what to do.
That's right. Number 5.
Probably for me, I put knowing when to move on.
Mm.
And I think that is a part of projecting is like it's closely related to number 1 in the sense of like the time frame management, but also I think there's a lot more factors involved because you've tried and you have considered a lot of other things along the way, and it's either just not working out at the time, and like moving on doesn't mean giving up. It might just be moving it to the next season or the next year, or that you recognize like, whoa, I don't have that skill set for this climb or this grade right now. I just need to go back in and put in the work on similar styles and things like that. So, I mean, one of my examples, I guess, right now is that like I've always been a sport climber, always been known for face and slab climbing. I think I've probably done 1 to maybe 3 sessions of face or slab climbing in the last 2 years because I've tried to actually work on my weaknesses and to like learn how to climb steep and get something much more kind of out of my element because anytime I would want to push my grade locally, what we have is we don't have any hard stuff that are face and slab climbing. So if I want to go try these other things, it was going to be on steep climbing, but if I wouldn't allow myself to be on it, I couldn't gain the skills to suddenly go out and expect me to get it. And so I could, this is going to be my project, but I didn't know how to climb on it. Like I didn't know how to project it because I didn't know how to do that type of climbing.
Right.
And
Yep.
so it's like I've had to put seasons and take away from my strengths a little bit because I actually am trying to tap into something that like we have more of, and that style that I happen to be around, I have more of. And a couple is probably one of those 3 sessions, or a couple sessions was maybe last week, climbing with 2 clients, and we just climbing around the gym. But it was funny, I got to go back to face climbing and slab climbing, and I loved it. Like I had a great time, but I was pretty much immediately good at it again, because it's like I've had 11 years doing that. Like I haven't done it in 2 years, but I know how to do that. And so even in that one session, like, yeah, I've taken that time away, but the skills have stayed. I have a great understanding of how I move on that. But overhang is still a battle for me because it's only a couple years of truly trying to learn it and not just hope I get lucky on the holds and operate it a little bit, but understand like how to apply a pattern or a technique to that climb. So, and that's his thing. Time under tension in a way, time on the wall in a way. It's like 11 years, 2
100%.
years. It makes sense.
And I hate slab climb as much as the next person. Well, maybe not you.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
But god damn it, if it didn't help me climb better, especially when things that looked face climby or overhung involved slab like features, and you're like, damn it, I got to use this foot in this way. I don't know how to do this. And so you spend a little bit of time doing the other skill, and you come back and you can do the thing you want to. I think that might maybe speak to maybe like a bonus 6th thing to do. And maybe your thoughts on, maybe just says like climbing things out of that project style or out of your style, and how it can aid in the patterning and skills and tools and toolbox to then do that specific thing a little bit better.
I agree that I think that's really important to do. I would say I don't put it, the reason I wouldn't put that in with the projecting is probably because that's just great skill development as a climber. But if you're, to me, I think projecting is leaning into a strength at the time, or projecting something of that type of skill that you're looking for. And so like, I think you can have slab projects and overhang projects, definitely. And they might be vastly different in grades and things like that. And so I guess I'm not necessarily, I mean, it can imply you have to climb multiple styles if you want to climb multiple styles, right? And so it's like, if you don't climb face climbing very often, it's going to be hard for you, even though you can cruise anything steep roof, so put the time where it's needed, but it's only needed if you care about it.
Gotcha.
Like you probably aren't going to go climb a bunch of slabs out in Yosemite or like dig that. Like I love to climb slabs, but I just don't have enough or either around me, and I kind of have the skill set. And so now I want to spend my time somewhere else. But that being said, one of the closest crags to me, I've gone to it 3 times in 10 years living here and stuff, because it is the anti-style of like, I just don't even care about it. It's thuggy roof climbing and like, it's just something I don't care about. And so, but it has the grades that I like, it has probably the best grade range of stuff that I want to do. Like it's got upper 13s and 14s and cool stuff that would be good for me, but I could learn and spend a ton of time gaining that skill, but the style does not appeal to me. The area is beautiful. You can climb over a waterfall, you got to do all this thing. That's kind of cool. I like to hang out there, but I don't want to take those skills somewhere else. Like I don't want to travel to another area to do that style of climbing, because it's not my style. It's not something I enjoy.
Right.
Maybe in time, maybe next season, something will switch and I'll be
strong fingers come in, dude.
That's right now. I don't want to do it. because I have a couple other things, but maybe like that's the coolest part about climbing. Every season, every year, we can switch to a different discipline and kind of start the game of learning and projecting in something else. Like I can get into trad, I can get into face climbing, I can get into overhang roof climbs. Like I can find it, and the skills are going to be waiting there because I haven't put the time into them. And so that time under tension or time on the wall, it just hasn't been there.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's another big thing to consider is that project hard for you, but because you didn't put the time in to it, you know, I think that's going to be very different.
Right.
than-
Oh, absolutely. That's a good list. And so for the listeners, we want to start doing, I mean, especially if you have any questions, man, shoot us questions, comments, and all that kind of stuff. We can tailor these a little bit more specifically to anything like that. We do have a Ask the Coaches episode planned and that theme planned for the future. But these things are always, it's going to be in general. And so how to apply them specifically to you comes from asking us questions either personally or, through coaching and whatnot. But this was very thorough. I know I learned a lot. I've got some ideas and some reflections to do on the things I want to do, and especially to continue to expand skills as a climber and then be able to apply them coming back into something more. So I'm excited.
I guess I could give like a prompt to the listeners and to you. Like I just did this with two athletes, last night, 2 nights ago. Anyways, I love working with these two because their strengths are polar opposites. But it was kind of cool to just when they're asking like, hey, what should I be working on? I was like, well, I mean, again, like I can giving somebody a skill in a drill doesn't mean it's going to actually apply to them. And so like you have to kind of want to learn a skill or a drill and then go seek it. And they're like, well, which one should I spend time on? I'm like, well, what ones are you avoiding? And to get them to answer that is before the session started, I just had them walk around the gym and just walk. Don't touch anything. But if you've seen it before, if they've been on it before or looked at it and kept walking because they got either intimidated by it or something, like that had a lesson in there. Like there's a lesson right there. Like, okay, why have you're having a hard time standing on those bad feet? How many climbs in this gym with bad feet have you been on? They're pretty much actively avoided all of these areas. The next person, oh, I'm terrible at like powerful moves and steep stuff. Cool. Like, where are you avoiding? I've never been to that back room before. Oh, where all the steep, powerful stuff is? Yeah. So it's like they absolutely knew the answer. And if you just said, okay, walk the gym, where do you avoid? Like what have you been on that was hard for you, no matter what the grade was, and you probably didn't finish it because you're like, oh my God, I had this hard thing. I fell on a 3 and I normally climb 8s. It's like that 3 has a million lessons for you. Who cares what that 8 has over there? So I think part of it is just, we all know what we should be working on. And that when we ask for skills and drills, that you're probably not asking for the ones that you need. You're probably looking for other things that are common, but it's like, chances are you need to just learn how to pull on steep overhang and, on this thing, or you need to learn how to press through these bad feet, and so whatever the case is, or carry momentum, not go static, all the time. And so walk the gym. What do you actively avoid? What do you look at and say, ew, that's probably good. That's probably a telltale sign that there's something there. You don't have to enjoy it, but you probably have your most low-hanging fruit of anything you cringe by.
That's awesome. And that will be the homework for you guys. So you guys are going to let us know in our Instagrams, again, at Technically Strong, at Lips McGee, at C4HP, what you walked by, you said ill, then you actually got on, and what lesson you learned. And you're going to let us know, and we'll start sharing those and talking about those. So that's a wrap.
Out.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today and listening to today's podcast with Coach Gabe Olson. I hope you guys have learned as much as I did. I always take something incredibly valuable from any conversation that I have with Gabe, whether it's out at the crag or after clinics or even just over our Zoom calls. Remember, Coach Gabe can help you one-on-one and to help clarify these concepts for you specifically. He works with clients from all around the world, remotely helping them work through their projects, climb, and improve their technical skills. So make sure you visit our website, camp4humanperformance.com, if you're looking to improve your climbing skills, tactics, or behaviors with Coach Gabe Olson. And as always, your support means the world to us. Please share this with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us comments, leave us reviews and honest feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys think about the podcast, the quality of the podcast, the audio, if we're using words that are too big or not. Let us know. We are a podcast for the people. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.